The night I learned fear could have a witness, I was serving coffee to a man everyone else was afraid to look at. It was 2:13 in the morning, the hour when Chicago stopped pretending to be beautiful and showed its bones under the rain. The diner sat on the corner of Halsted and a street most people drove through without slowing down, its red neon sign buzzing like an insect above the windows, its floor smelling of old grease, burnt coffee, and lemon cleaner that never quite won the fight. I had been on my feet for 10 hours. My arches hurt. My ponytail had slipped loose. The sleeves of my gray uniform shirt were pulled down to my knuckles even though the heat from the kitchen made sweat gather at the back of my neck. I told myself it was because I was cold. I had become very good at lying to myself in small, practical ways. Table 4 wanted more syrup. A trucker at the counter wanted his eggs over easy, not scrambled, even though he had ordered scrambled. The college boys near the jukebox were laughing too loudly at jokes that were not funny. Normal things. Safe things. Things I could survive. Then my phone buzzed in the pocket of my apron, and my whole body forgot how to breathe. I didn't have to look. I knew who it was. Ryan always texted in bursts, like knocking hard enough on a door to make the hinges nervous. 1 buzz. 2. 3. I kept pouring coffee into a chipped white mug until it overflowed and burned my fingers. "You okay, Emily?" Marlene called from behind the register. I smiled because smiling was easier than explaining. "Fine," I said. My voice came out thin, but the diner was noisy enough to hide it. I reached for a towel, and that was when I saw the pickup across the street. Dark blue. One headlight dimmer than the other. Parked beneath the broken street lamp like it had been waiting there for years. My stomach dropped so fast I had to grip the edge of the counter. Through the rain-streaked glass I could not see his face, only the shape of him behind the windshield, still and patient. Ryan did not need to come inside to frighten me. He knew that. He knew the sound of his engine could do what shouting used to do. My phone buzzed again. "Come outside. Now." I shoved it deeper into my apron pocket, as if fabric could protect me from a sentence. The bell above the front door rang. Cold air swept in, carrying rain and expensive cologne and something heavier, something that made every conversation lower by instinct. 3 men entered. 2 stayed near the door in dark coats, scanning the booths without moving their heads much. The third walked to booth 7 by the window, the one with the cracked leather seat and the best view of the street. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with black hair brushed back from a face too calm to be kind. His coat was black wool, tailored perfectly, the kind of coat that did not belong in a 24-hour diner with sticky menus and scratched Formica tables. He sat down without asking. The room adjusted around him. That was the only way I could describe it. Even the college boys stopped laughing. I grabbed the coffee pot because it gave my hand something to do. When I reached his table, he looked up. His eyes were gray, not soft gray like morning fog, but steel gray, like the sky before sirens. "Coffee?" I asked. "Black," he said. 1 word. Low. Controlled. I filled his cup, careful not to spill this time. His gaze moved from my face to my hands, then to the window behind me. He noticed everything. I hated that. I needed people not to notice. Not the sleeves. Not the shaking. Not the way I flinched when tires hissed against wet pavement outside. My phone buzzed again and I whispered before I could stop myself, barely louder than steam escaping the coffee machine. "I'm scared." The words fell out of me like a secret dropped on the floor. I froze. I hadn't meant to say them. I hadn't meant for anyone to hear. But the man in booth 7 slowly lifted his eyes from his coffee to my face, and in that instant I understood 2 things. He had heard me, and whoever he was, the sentence had changed him. He did not ask me to repeat it. That was the first thing that unsettled me. Most people made fear prove itself before they believed it. They wanted a story, a reason, a bruise they could see, a broken thing they could point to, a name. The man in booth 7 only looked at me once, and somehow that was enough. His gray eyes stayed on my face for 2 seconds too long, then shifted past my shoulder to the rain-covered window, to the dark blue pickup across the street, to the one dim headlight glowing like a tired eye. His expression did not change. That frightened me more than anger would have. Anger was loud. Anger made mistakes. This man went still, and stillness on him felt like a door locking somewhere I could not see. I set the coffee pot down before my hand could betray me again. The glass was warm beneath my fingers. Too warm. I needed to move. Needed to smile. Needed to keep being Emily Carter, waitress, 25 years old, working the graveyard shift, not Emily Carter, woman with a phone full of messages she was too afraid to open. Cream? I asked because people like me survive by pretending normal questions mattered. No, he said. Then after a beat. What is your name? The question was simple. Polite almost. Still my throat tightened. Emily. His eyes dipped to the plastic name tag pinned crookedly to my shirt, then returned to me. Emily, he repeated, as if testing the shape of it. Who is outside? My heart slammed once, hard enough that I felt it behind my ribs. I looked toward the counter, toward Marlene, toward the swinging kitchen door where our cook, Javier, was scraping the grill. Nobody was watching us closely. Nobody ever did when it mattered. Just someone waiting, I said. It was a bad lie. Thin as napkin paper. The man knew it. I saw that in the calm patience of his face. But he did not corner me with it. He did not lean forward. He did not lower his voice into something intimate or cruel. He simply lifted his coffee, took one slow sip, and placed the cup back in the saucer without a sound. Waiting for you. My fingers curled into my apron. The phone buzzed again. This time the vibration felt like it traveled through my bones. I did not pull it out. I could already imagine the words. I can see you. Do not make me come inside. Smile, Emily. Act normal. Stop embarrassing me. Ryan had always been careful with words in public. Careful. Enough that other people heard concern where I heard a warning. I swallowed. I should check on my other tables. You should stay where people can see you. That made me look at him. Really look. There was no softness in his face, but there was something stranger than softness. Restraint. Like a man holding back an entire storm because he had noticed I was already drowning in rain. I do not know you, I said. My voice shook and I hated it. No, he said. But I heard you. The words landed quietly. Not like a promise. Not yet. More like a fact the room itself had to accept. I stepped back because the truth in his voice scared me almost as much as the truck outside. The bell above the door rang again when a delivery driver hurried in from the rain, shaking water from his jacket. For 1 second, everyone looked toward the entrance. I looked too. When my eyes returned to the window, the pickup was no longer parked across the street. My breath caught. The empty space beneath the broken street lamp looked worse than the truck had. My phone buzzed one more time. I forced myself to take it out. The screen glowed against my palm. Back door. Now. The diner noise blurred into a low hum. My knees felt loose. I could smell coffee burning on the warmer, hear the soft scratch of Nathan Blake's spoon against porcelain, though I did not know his name yet. Then his voice cut through everything, low and certain. Emily. I looked up. The man in booth 7 was no longer looking at his coffee. He was looking at me like he had already made a decision. Do not go outside alone. I should have obeyed him. I knew that even then. Standing in the narrow space between booth 7 and the counter with my phone glowing in my hand like evidence. Some part of me, the part that still understood danger clearly, wanted to slide into the booth across from the stranger in the black coat and let the whole diner witness me staying. But fear does not always make you wise. Sometimes fear makes you polite. Sometimes it makes you ashamed. Sometimes it makes you believe that if you just follow the rules one more time, the storm will pass without breaking anything. I locked my phone, shoved it into my apron, and forced my face into something that might have looked like a smile from far away. I just need to take out the trash, I said. It was the kind of excuse that sounded normal enough to be invisible. Nathan Blake watched me in silence. I still did not know his name, but the room seemed to know him. The men by the door stood a little straighter when his fingers touched the rim of his coffee cup. Not lifted. Not pointed. Just touched. A signal so small I almost missed it. Emily, he said again. Not loud. Not commanding. Just my name weighted with warning. I looked at him and for one strange second I wanted to tell him everything. About Ryan. About the calls. About the way I had started parking under the brightest light even when it meant walking farther. About the way my apartment no longer felt like mine because fear had learned the shape of every room. Instead, I shook my head. I am fine. The lie tasted old. Marlene was counting the register slips when I passed. Taking the back? She asked. Just for a second, I said. She nodded without looking up. That hurt more than it should have. Not because she did not care. Because nobody sees a woman disappear when she has practiced disappearing quietly. The hallway behind the kitchen smelled like onions, bleach, and wet cardboard. The fluorescent light above the storage shelves flickered twice, buzzing like it was nervous too. I pushed open the metal back door and stepped into the alley. Cold rain misted my face. The dumpster sat 10 feet away, green and dented, half hidden in shadow. Beyond it, the alley opened toward the side street where the diner sign painted everything red. I heard the door click shut behind me. Then I heard my name. Emily. Ryan stood near the brick wall, hands in the pockets of his navy jacket, hair damp from the rain. He looked almost normal. That was the worst part. Clean jeans. Work boots. The face everyone trusted at barbecues and gas stations and grocery store lines. The kind of man strangers would describe as worried before they ever believed he was dangerous. You ignored me, he said. My fingers found the edge of my apron and twisted it. I am working. You are embarrassing me. His voice stayed low, controlled for anyone who might be close enough to hear. You think serving coffee to strangers at 2 in the morning makes you independent? I took one step back. My shoulder touched the cold door. Please leave. He smiled, but there was no kindness in it. You always say please when you are scared. My throat tightened. I reached behind me for the handle. It did not move. For one terrible second I thought it was locked. My palm slipped against the wet metal. Ryan stepped closer, not fast, not dramatic, just close enough to make the alley feel smaller. We are going to talk, he said. Not here, I whispered. Yes, here. My phone buzzed in my apron, and the sound made both of us look down. Ryan's expression changed. Who is texting you? I did not answer. His eyes moved past me to the diner windows, narrowed, then returned to my face. Is it him? The man at the booth. My breath caught before I could hide it. That was answer enough. He reached toward my apron pocket, and I jerked back so quickly my elbow knocked against the door. Pain flashed up my arm, small but sharp. The sleeve slid back from my wrist. Ryan saw the marks there and looked annoyed, as if my skin had betrayed him by remembering. Then another voice entered the alley, quiet enough that it should not have stopped the rain, but somehow it did. Take one more step toward her, and every choice you make after that belongs to me. Ryan froze. I turned my head. Nathan stood at the mouth of the alley in his black coat, rain shining on his shoulders, the red diner sign cutting across his face like a warning. Behind him, the two men from the door waited without speaking. Nathan did not look at them. He looked only at me. His gaze dropped to my wrist, then to my face, and the coldness in him shifted into something deeper. Not rage. Not yet. Something worse because it was controlled. Who made you afraid to breathe? He asked. I did not answer him. I could not. The question reached too deep, past the alley, past Ryan, past every careful excuse I had built around myself. Who made you afraid to breathe? No one had ever asked. That way. People asked why I stayed. Why I did not block the number. Why I looked tired. Why I wore long sleeves in August. They asked questions that sounded like doors closing. Nathan asked one that felt like a window opening, and the air coming through it scared me because I had forgotten what air was supposed to feel like. Ryan let out a short laugh, but it cracked at the edges. This is none of your business. Nathan did not look at him. That was the strange part. Ryan had spent years making himself the loudest thing in every room, and Nathan dismissed him with silence. His eyes stayed on me. Rain slid from his dark hair to the collar of his black coat. The red diner sign blinked behind him, washing the brick walls in pulses of color. Red. Dark. Red. Dark. My wrist burned where the sleeve had fallen back, and I pulled it down with shaking fingers. Nathan saw the movement. His jaw tightened, but he still did not come closer. Emily, he said, and my name sounded different in his mouth. Not claimed. Not owned. Anchored. Do you want him near you? The question stunned me. Ryan turned his head sharply. Do not ask her that. Nathan finally looked at him. Just once. The alley went quiet in a way that felt almost physical. Even the rain seemed softer. I was not speaking to you. Ryan's face shifted, color rising beneath his skin, but he did not move forward. Something about Nathan stopped him. Not a threat I could see. Not anything loud enough for a passerby to notice. Just authority, cold and complete, standing between me and the thing I had mistaken for my whole life. Nathan turned back to me. Do you want him near you? He repeated. My lips parted. The answer was simple. The answer was impossible. For so long, every choice had come with a consequence. Every no had been treated like an invitation to argue. Every boundary had been turned into proof that I was cruel or ungrateful or dramatic. I looked at Ryan. He gave me that look, the one that said I would regret honesty. Then I looked at Nathan. He did not urge me. He did not tell me to be brave. He only waited, as if my answer deserved all the time in the world. No, he whispered. The word barely made it past my teeth. But Nathan heard it. Of course he did. There, he said quietly. That is the only answer that matters. Ryan scoffed. You think you can just walk into my personal life? Nathan took one step to the side, not toward me, but between Ryan and the path out of the alley. One of his men moved near the diner door, another toward the street, calm as shadows. No one touched Ryan. No one raised a hand. No one needed to. Your personal life ended where her fear began, Nathan said. My knees went weak, and I pressed my palm flat against the cold metal door to stay upright. Nathan noticed that too. His expression changed again, the sharp edge lowering into something careful. He removed his coat slowly, making sure I could see every movement before he held it out, not draping it over me, not stepping into my space, just offering it across the distance between us. You are cold, he said. I stared at the coat. Black wool. Rain-darkened shoulders. The kind of expensive fabric I would have been afraid to touch on any other night. I am fine, I said automatically. His eyes softened by 1 degree. You keep saying that when you are not. The truth almost broke me. I reached for the coat with both hands. He released it the moment my fingers closed around the fabric, careful not to touch me. That was the first impossible thing he did. Not the cars. Not the men. Not the way Ryan suddenly looked smaller than I had ever seen him. It was the space Nathan gave me. The permission to choose. The power he had and did not use against me. I slipped the coat around my shoulders, and it was warm from his body, heavy enough to make me feel less likely to fly apart. Ryan stared like the gesture offended him more than any insult could have. Emily, he said, warning hidden inside my name. I flinched. Nathan saw it. His voice dropped lower. Say her name like that again, and this conversation moves to my lawyers, your employer, and every security camera within 3 blocks. Ryan blinked. For the first time, uncertainty crossed his face. Nathan reached into his suit jacket and took out a plain black card. He placed it on the wet pavement between us, as if laying down evidence. You are going to leave now, he said. You are going to stop calling her. You are going to stop waiting outside her work. You are going to stop teaching her that fear is normal. Ryan looked at me, waiting for me to soften, to apologize, to rescue him from the consequences of his own shadow. I did not. I gripped Nathan's coat tighter and breathed in for what felt like the first time all night. Nathan glanced at me once, steady and unreadable. I will not touch you unless you ask me to, he said. But I will not ignore fear when it sits at my table. Ryan left because Nathan told him to, but he did not leave like a defeated man. He left like a man memorizing the room for later. I watched him walk past the mouth of the alley, shoulders stiff, jaw tight, rain shining on his navy jacket. His pickup started around the corner a few seconds later, the engine turning over with that uneven cough I knew too well. The sound faded into the wet Chicago streets, but it did not take my fear with it. Fear stayed. It sat in my ribs. It curled under Nathan's coat. It whispered that men like Ryan never disappeared after one warning. They waited. They found softer doors. Nathan must have seen that thought cross my face, because he did not celebrate. He did not smile. He only looked toward the street, then back at me. You should go inside, he said. My fingers tightened around the edges of his coat. I have 4 hours left on my shift. Then you have 4 hours where he does not come near this building. I should have asked what that meant. I should have been frightened by how certain he sounded. Instead, I was tired. So tired that certainty felt like a blanket thrown over a fire. I nodded and reached for the back door. This time, when my wet palm slipped on the handle, Nathan stepped forward, then stopped himself before getting too close. He waited until I looked at him. "May I?" he asked. 2 words. That was all. May I? Not move. Not let me. Not come here. I nodded once. He opened the door for me and stepped aside so I could enter first. The kitchen noise hit me like life returning. Javier scraping the grill. Marlene arguing with the receipt printer. Plates clattering in the sink. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had. I was still Emily Carter in a gray uniform, still broke, still exhausted, still carrying a phone full of messages I had not answered. But Nathan Blake had heard me say no, and the world had not ended. That kind of thing can ruin a woman's tolerance for being afraid. I finished the next hour on trembling legs. Nathan returned to booth 7 and drank his coffee like he had nowhere else in the city to be. His 2 men stayed by the front windows, quiet enough that customers slowly forgot to stare. Every time the bell above the door rang, my heart jumped. Every time headlights slid across the glass, I looked up. Nathan never told me to calm down. He never told me I was safe. He simply stayed, and somehow that said more. At 3:30, Marlene sent me to refill the napkin dispensers near the storage room. I was stacking paper squares with stiff fingers when my phone lit up again. Unknown number. My stomach turned cold. I almost ignored it. Then a photo appeared. My apartment door. My apartment number. The little clay sunflower I had bought from a street fair last spring hanging crooked on the knob. Beneath it, a message. "You made a mistake." I could not breathe. Another message came before I could move. "I still have a key." The hallway tilted. The napkins slipped from my hands and scattered across the floor like white birds. For 1 second, I was not in the diner anymore. I was picturing my tiny studio on the 3rd floor. The thrift store curtains, the stack of nursing school brochures on my desk, the lock I had begged the landlord to change and never could afford to replace myself. My home was not safe. Maybe it had never been safe. I backed into the storage shelves, one hand pressed to my mouth, the other holding the phone so tightly my knuckles ached. The door behind me opened. Nathan stood there, filling the frame without crossing the threshold. His eyes moved from my face to the phone. "Emily," he said carefully, "tell me what happened." I wanted to lie. Wanted to protect the last small scraps of privacy I had. But the lie would not come. My hand shook as I turned the screen toward him. He read the messages. Once. Only once. The temperature in his face vanished. Not anger. Not shock. Something cleaner. Decision. He reached into his coat, took out his own phone, and placed it on the shelf between us instead of handing it to me, as if even now he refused to force anything into my hands. "You choose," he said. "Police. Lawyer. Locksmith. A safe place. All of them. None of them. But you choose." My eyes burned. I do not know how. His voice softened, almost too low to hear over the rain against the roof. "Then start with 1 word." I looked down at his phone, then at mine, then toward the front windows, where the street outside suddenly flashed white. 1 pair of headlights. Then another. Then another. Every black car along the curb turned on at the same time, facing the rain like the city itself had opened its eyes. I looked back at Nathan, and for the first time that night, fear had to share the room with something else. "Help," I whispered. The word barely left my mouth, but Nathan moved like he had been waiting his whole life to hear it. Not fast enough to scare me. Not sudden enough to make me flinch. Just certain. He picked up his phone from the shelf, pressed 1 number and said, "She asked for help." That was all. For words, and the diner changed shape around me. The men by the windows did not rush. They did not shout. They did not do any of the things I had learned to fear from powerful men. They simply stepped outside into the rain and turned their backs to the glass, forming a quiet wall between me and the street. One of them spoke into a phone. Another walked to the front entrance and stood beneath the red neon sign. Hands visible, posture calm. Nathan stayed in the storage room doorway, close enough to hear me breathe, far enough away that I did not feel trapped. "Emily," he said, "I am going to ask you questions. You can answer or not answer." Nothing happens without your permission. My throat ached. I nodded because speaking felt too hard. Do you want? The police called. My eyes went to my phone, to Ryan's message, to the photograph of my apartment door. Every instinct said no. Police meant statements. Statements meant questions. Questions meant people asking why I had not handled this sooner. But Nathan did not look impatient. He waited like my fear was not an inconvenience. Yes, I whispered. He nodded once and repeated it into his phone. Police. Non-emergency line first, unless she requests otherwise. Send the messages. Preserve the camera footage. Preserve. That word steadied me. It made my fear feel less like panic and more like evidence. Do you want a lawyer present when you speak to them? He asked. I blinked. I cannot. By sunrise, my name was no longer something Ryan could say like a warning. It was written on reports, spoken into recorded phone calls, protected by signatures from people who knew the law better than I knew fear. Nathan never once told me what to do. That was the part one kept returning to, even while I sat in the back office of the diner with a blanket around my shoulders and Marlene crying quietly beside the filing cabinet. He had brought in a lawyer first, a woman named Grace Holloway with silver hair, sharp glasses, and a voice calm enough to hold up a collapsing room. Then he called the police. Then a locksmith. Then the building manager I had been too afraid to confront for 6 months. Each time, Nathan placed the phone on the table in front of me and waited for me to nod before anyone moved. His men stood outside the diner with their backs to the windows, not watching me, not crowding me, not making me feel like a spectacle. That was the second impossible thing he did. He made power feel quiet. Grace sat beside me and helped me save every message Ryan had sent. The threats. The photos. The timestamps. The calls I had ignored. The security footage from the diner showed his truck outside for almost 2 hours. The camera above the alley showed him waiting by the back door. Nothing dramatic. Nothing the world could twist into a misunderstanding. Just the plain shape of a man who thought fear made him invisible. At 6:45 in the morning, 2 officers came in through the front entrance, their boots squeaking softly on the wet tile. My hand started shaking again. Nathan noticed, but he did not step closer. He only shifted his chair slightly, placing himself where I could see him without blocking the door. Grace spoke for me when my voice failed. Then, when the officers asked if I wanted to give a statement, Nathan looked at me, not them. Only if you want to, he said. The old Emily would have apologized before answering. She would have worried about causing trouble, about ruining Ryan's life, about making people uncomfortable with the truth. I thought about my apartment door. My phone. The way I had whispered helped like it was the last word I owned. Then I lifted my head. Yes, I said. I want to. The statement took 40 minutes. It felt like walking barefoot across broken memories, but nobody rushed me. Nobody asked why I had waited so long. Nobody made my fear sound like poor judgment. By the time the officers left, Ryan was no longer just a shadow outside my window. He was a case number. A pending order of protection. A man with consequences finally moving toward him in daylight. Nathan stood near the counter while Grace packed her briefcase. The diner had begun filling with morning customers, construction workers in reflective jackets, nurses ending overnight shifts, an old man who came every day for oatmeal and black coffee. Life kept arriving in ordinary clothes. I looked down at Nathan's coat still wrapped around my shoulders and realized I had been wearing it for hours. I should give this back, I said. He glanced at the coat, then at my face. Not until you are warm. I cannot pay you for any of this. The words came out before I could stop them, because gratitude had always frightened me. Favors had strings. Help had hooks. Kindness always turned into a debt if you accepted too much of it. Nathan's expression changed, and for the first time, I saw something almost wounded beneath the steel. I did not help you so you would owe me, he said. The diner noise softened around us. Plates clinked. Rainwater dripped from umbrellas near the door. Somewhere behind me, Marlene sniffled into a napkin. Then why? I asked. Nathan looked toward the window, where morning had turned the glass pale gray and honest. When he answered, his voice was low enough that only I could hear. Because someone should have. Those 4 words went through me harder than any promise. I had spent years believing rescue had to arrive loud, demanding, impossible to trust. But Nathan Blake had brought lawyers instead of chaos, witnesses instead of rumors, choices instead of commands. He had not erased my fear. He had placed it under light where it could no longer pretend to be my fault. Outside, a black car waited at the curb, its engine running softly in the rain. Grace had arranged for a temporary place where Ryan had no key, no address, no way to stand outside my door and turn my home into a cage. Nathan did not ask to take me there. He did not assume. He only opened the diner door and stood aside, letting the morning air reach me first. For the first time in years, the city did not feel like it was watching me fall. It felt like it had finally learned my name. The safe place was not what I expected. I had imagined marble floors, armed men, a penthouse above the city, some cold room where money tried to imitate comfort. Instead, Grace took me to a small brick townhouse on a quiet street in Lincoln Park, 3 stories tall, with white curtains in the windows and a porch light that glowed soft yellow through the morning rain. Nathan rode in the front passenger seat of the black car, and said almost nothing the entire way. He gave directions only when needed. He answered one phone call in a voice so low I could not make out the words. Mostly, he watched the streets, not like a man afraid of them, but like a man responsible for what might come out of them. When we arrived, he stepped out first, looked up and down the block, then opened my door and moved back, leaving room for me to choose whether to get out. That was becoming his language. Space. Waiting. Permission. I stepped onto the wet curb with his coat still around my shoulders. The townhouse smelled like clean laundry, old wood and lavender. Grace said it belonged to a foundation Nathan funded quietly, a temporary home for women who needed time, locks, and silence. She said it gently, as if she knew the word shelter could feel too much like proof of failure. I stood in the entryway looking at the staircase, the framed watercolor prints, the bowl of wrapped peppermints on the console table, and suddenly I could not stop shaking. Not because I was in danger, because I was not. Safety can be frightening when your body does not recognize it yet. Grace showed me the guest room upstairs, gave me a new phone, and promised to return after court opened. Marlene had packed my purse and nursing school brochures in a paper grocery bag. My apartment locks would be changed by noon. The order of protection would be filed before lunch. The world was moving with terrifying speed, but for once it was moving for me. Nathan waited downstairs by the living room window. When I came back down, he was staring at a small silver picture frame on the mantel. I saw a girl in the photo, maybe 17, pale hair, bright smile, one arm thrown around Nathan when he was younger. He looked less carved from stone in the picture. Almost boyish. Almost happy. Who is she? I asked before I could stop myself. His fingers touched the edge of the frame, then fell away. Lily, he said. The name changed the room. I heard it in the pause after he spoke. Your sister. He nodded. For a moment, the man who made diners go quiet and lawyers arrive before sunrise looked impossibly tired. She called me one night, he said. Years ago. I was in a meeting. I thought I would call back when it was over. His eyes stayed on the photograph. She left a message. 4 words. My throat tightened because I already knew. I knew before he said it. She said she was scared. Rain ticked softly against the windows. Somewhere upstairs an old heater clicked awake. Nathan's jaw moved once like he was trying to swallow glass. By the time I listened, it was too late to help her the way she needed. He did not give me details. He did not have to. The absence of them was kinder than the truth might have been. I looked at the girl in the frame, at her easy smile, at Nathan's younger face beside hers, and understood something I had missed all night. His silence was not emptiness. It was a room he had locked around a memory. That is why you heard me, I whispered. He turned from the mantel then. His gray eyes met mine, and the steel in them looked different in daylight. Not softer exactly. More human. No, he said. I heard you because you said it. Lily is why I could not walk away after. The honesty of that undid me. I sat on the edge of the couch because my legs did not feel trustworthy. Nathan did not move toward me. He stayed by the mantel with the photograph between us, as if Lily herself had become a witness. I am not a good man, Emily, he said. People will tell you that. Some of them will be right. I looked at the black coat around my shoulders, at the new phone in my hand, at the clean quiet room where nobody had a key to reach me. Maybe, I said. But last night, you were good to me. He closed his eyes for 1 second, and that single crack in his control felt more intimate than any confession. When he opened them again, the monster of Chicago looked less like a monster and more like a man who had been bleeding quietly for years. For the first time, I wondered if rescue could move both ways. Maybe he had pulled me out of the rain. Maybe I had brought one ghost into the light. 1 week later, I returned to the diner with my own keys in my pocket and no borrowed coat on my shoulders. That should not have felt revolutionary, but it did. The air was cold enough to turn my breath white as I crossed Halsted under a pale morning sky, and every step sounded different from the ones I used to take. Lighter, maybe. Or maybe I was only noticing my feet because for once I was not listening for a truck behind me. The order of protection had been filed. My locks had been changed. Grace had walked me through words I never thought I would have the courage to say out loud. Ryan was no longer a shadow with my address. He was a name inside a system that finally knew how to answer him. I still woke up at night. I still checked windows. I still flinched when my phone rang from an unknown number. Healing did not arrive like sunrise, all at once and golden. Came in pieces. A new lock. A quiet room. A lawyer who answered after midnight. A woman in the mirror learning not to apologize for surviving. Marlene cried when she saw me and pretended she was not crying by wiping the counter too hard. Javier made me pancakes even though breakfast rush had started and told me they were burned, which was his way of being tender without embarrassing either of us. The red neon sign buzzed above the window. The coffee smelled too strong. The booth still had cracks in the leather. Everything was the same, which made everything feel impossible. At 7:12, the bell above the front door rang. I did not look up right away. I knew before I saw him. Conversations lowered by instinct, chairs shifted. The whole diner adjusting around a presence it did not understand. Nathan Blake walked in wearing a charcoal overcoat this time. No men beside him, no black cars crowding the curb. Just him. Tall, quiet, careful with the space he occupied. He went to booth 7 and sat where the rain had found him the first night. For a moment, I only watched from behind the counter with a coffee pot in my hand. He did not call me over. He did not wave. He did not claim my attention like it belonged to him. He waited. That was the language I understood now. Space. Waiting. Permission. I poured coffee into a clean mug and walked to his table. My hands did not shake. Not because I was unafraid of him exactly. Nathan would always carry danger the way winter carries cold. It was simply part of the air around him. But danger was not the same as harm. I had learned that in the space between his silence and my choices. I set the mug down in front of him. Black, I said. His eyes lifted to mine, and something faint moved through them. Not quite a smile, but close enough to make him look younger. You remembered. You are difficult to forget. The words surprised both of us. Heat rose in my face, but I did not take them back. The old Emily would have filled the silence with apologies. This Emily let it breathe. Nathan. Looked down at the coffee, then back at me. How are the locks? Strong. The phone. New number. The apartment? I thought about my little studio, the clay sunflower back on the door, the curtains washed, the brochures for nursing school spread across my desk like a future daring me to touch it. Mine again, I said. His expression softened by that single degree I had started to recognize. Good. I slid into the booth across from him before fear could ask permission to return. Nathan went still, but he did not look displeased. If anything, the quiet around him deepened. I kept thinking about what you said. I told him. About not being a good man. His gaze lowered, guarded now. Emily. No. Let me finish. My voice was gentle, but it held. That alone felt like a miracle. Maybe you have done things I will never understand. Maybe people are right to fear you. But that night you had every kind of power I was taught to run from, and you used it to give me a choice. Outside, morning traffic moved through wet streets. A bus sighed at the curb. Somewhere behind us, Marlene dropped a spoon and muttered under her breath. Nathan said nothing. I reached across the table, stopped halfway, and waited until his eyes met mine. Then I placed his black card beside the coffee mug. I do not want to owe you, I said. I know. And I do not want to belong to anyone. Good, he said quietly. You should belong to yourself first. The sentence settled inside me like a door closing against the cold. I smiled then, small but real. Nathan saw it the way he saw everything, and for the first time, his own mouth curved with something almost peaceful. I stood smoothing my apron, feeling the weight of the diner, the city, my life returning to my hands one ordinary piece at a time. Before I walked away, he spoke. Emily. I turned. Are you still scared? I looked through the window at the street that had once felt like a threat, then at the man in booth 7 who had heard one whisper and changed the direction of my life without ever taking it from me. Sometimes, I said, but not of my own voice anymore. He nodded, as if that was the only victory that mattered. I went back behind the counter and poured coffee for the morning crowd. Sleeves rolled to my elbows, wrists bare, heart unhidden. Nathan stayed until the cup went cold, asking for nothing, taking nothing, guarding the silence without owning it. And when I walked home that evening under a clean Chicago sky, he did not follow too close. He walked on the other side of the sidewalk, hands in his coat pockets, matching my pace only because I allowed it. For once, danger was not chasing me. It was walking beside me, quiet enough to let me hear myself breathe. He did not raise his hand. He raised my standard.